Go on, pull it out if you can. Dustin didn't want to waste his breath any longer. He tossed the sword back to its original spot and walked out the stone doors. There were 3 stone doors in the stone room. Dustin simply chose one and entered. He didn't prolong the situation for Emily's and Vanessa's sake. Instead, he chose to go his separate way. After all, it wasn't like Walter could retrieve the sword. There was no harm in leaving the sword here. The most important thing was the Shadow Bloom. Once he found the Shadow Bloom, he could still return and get the sword. Stop right there, punk. As Walter watched Dustin walk away, his anger flared. He raised his hand and was about to deliver a lethal blow. Stop. At that moment, Vanessa suddenly jumped between them. Walter jumped in fright. Afraid that he would accidentally injure his daughter, he stopped himself. Ultimately, he watched Dustin and the 2 others slowly walk into the darkness. Stupid girl. How dare you go against me over an outsider? You're incredibly foolish. Walter stamped his foot in disappointment. How did he raise such an ungrateful child? Dad, the treasure is important, but you can't give up your conscience, Vanessa said. Righteously. Walter raised his hand to hit her, but in the end, he stopped himself. He only had one precious daughter. He couldn't hurt her. Master Chasey, he is gone, but the sword is here. Why don't we try again? Emily said, tentatively. HMPH. I refuse to believe that only that punk can pull it out. Walter gritted his teeth and approached the sword again. Then, he grabbed the hilt with both hands and tried to lift it. However, the sword didn't budge. It reacted differently than it did in Dustin's presence. Useless, trash, I'll destroy you. Walter tried a few more times, and his embarrassment turned into anger. Since he couldn't get it, he wanted to destroy it. He slammed his palm on the hilt of the sword. Boom! There was an explosion. The sword didn't move. Instead, an invisible force forced Walter to stagger backward. Suddenly, blood rushed through him, and his arm went numb. He couldn't pull it out nor destroy it. He was about to die from frustration. After composing himself, he left the disciples there to guard it. Then, he led the rest of the group through the other stone door. There was no point in trying. Perhaps there were better treasures inside. Inside the dim tunnel, Abigail was still upset. Sir, that old bastard crossed the line. Why? Didn't you teach him a lesson? There's no need to create additional problems for ourselves. Let's find the Shadow Bloom. First, Dustin said indifferently. The sword had already bonded with him. He could summon it any time, so he wasn't worried it'd get stolen. As they were walking, Azalea stopped in her tracks. Doctor, there's another crossroad ahead. At some point, a crossroad had appeared.